We need to avoid panic and fear. Ebola can be prevented. Exact words from UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. But what happens to a country whose doors are shut to the rest of the world? The last flight to have left the Liberian capital Monrovia was Delta Airlines Flight 479. My guest today is Mr. Lewiz McCarthy, a Liberian national living in the capital Monrovia, the very center of the epidemic. Mr. Lewiz McCarthy, many thanks for your time.
You're welcome, Jefferson.
It looks like no Liberian is happy with the situation in that country today.
Absolutely. Nobody would be happy to have a pandemic like Ebola in their country. So definitely a lot of people are not happy, and not just they're not happy. They're basically worried, panic all over the city. So that's the situation right now as we speak in Monrovia.
Even before we start the conversation, I want you to tell me how you feel about the way the international community is handling this particular situation. Pretty much aware, flights cancelled in Monrovia, nobody is getting into that country, Liberia, nobody is getting out of the country, nobody is getting inside the country. Even if there should be any relief items to some people who may need them, it's going to be very, very difficult for that to happen. How do you feel about that?
Basically, it's terrible. I think the international community needs to do more. Their approach towards this pandemic is not well enough. Even though you see the vivid presence of the UN, the United Nations in our country, security-wise, before the pandemic, they cut down on their presence in the country to give opportunity to Liberians themselves to take over a business sector. But I don't think the world as a whole is giving much attention to economically challenged countries like, let's say, Liberia, Guinea, and that of Sierra Leone. To make situation worse, where people, let's say, flight, which are some of the means of getting basic, commodity into the country, have been, cut off or are being reduced by the day.
And I clearly remember the last flight was the Delta Airline flight that flew from Monrovia on the 30th of August. And I think that's a very terrible thing. But you're living in the capital Monrovia yourself. I mean, at the very center of the whole thing. And we all saw on the international platform with regards to what happened at the West Point community. Tell me about this particular community and why has it been quarantined from the entire city of Monrovia? Because many people say that it is politically motivated in a way.
There will be no way that such a situation will be politically motivated. West Point location is so strategic. It's in the middle of the city and it's connected to the commercial district, which is called Waterside. All right, and West Point have the inhabitants of basically around 70,000, inhabitants, and it's so congested that just by walk, it have only one in the principal street. If you live in the principal street, you're going to be walking into somebody's living room, you're going to be walking into somebody's porch, and people at that point could never had to believe that Ebola do exist, despite the emphasis placed on this virus.
Why weren't people believing it? Was it not shown on national television or how?
I think we're being challenged when it comes to do with the electronic media. How many persons in West Point have access, to electricity? Looking at comparing them to having, a television that will be able to watch, what Ebola really look like. They will see it in the street, but it take. There's the policy in Liberia, right? People believe by saying, and one of the outcry of the population was, we want, if Ebola do exist into the nation, we want to see the patient of Ebola. And that was so impossible. Government couldn't go, displaying bodies with all, the consent of the relatives. So it took time for people to really get that. When the containment center were being, established, there were cases in West Point, so it was being established to contain these people based on the location based on the entire community, how where it's structured, because it's whole congested. So you couldn't get ambulances flowing in and out of West Point. So there was
no security measures put in place? I mean, you are in the capital. I'm asking you this because you are an eyewitness to everything that happened in the country, to the fact that the quarantine center, the people who were quarantined, you had a group of people from West Point entering, breaking the barriers, and then disrupting things there. I understand that some patients were touched in a way, and of course, this is a body-to-body thing, right? So it beats my imagination how that particular incident happened.
I'm going to speak to, I'm going to relate to that from my point of view, all right? If you have a place of West Point, they have the inhabitant of 70,000, inhabitants, and you have a security force of like 12 to 15 that will protect a quarantine, location. There will be no way they're going to stop a group of 35,000, marching on to take whatsoever, possessions that they think they could. I think at this moment, based on the virus being new to our, health, sector, it being that's pretty much unknown to a lot of people in Liberia, there will be mistakes. There will be, now we see the puzzles coming together. Because at first, everybody was doing what they think best to prevent the virus. So as time go by, we put the puzzles together. That's why we need, professional people that have the, virus experience with this virus to be able to come in to give her the necessary support.
The statistics I have for August 2014 is just alarming, and I just want to talk about it a little bit. Total cases suspected, 382. You have total cases, that is probable cases, 676, and total cases confirmed, 328. If you put all that together, you have 1,386 Ebola cases for a developing country, for a country that went down through civil war. Reconstruction was taking place, things were getting very normal, and to have this disease coming in at a point in time where the country needed the global attention a lot, I think it is very alarming. And for me, it is not just about ordinary people being infected by the disease. My understanding also is that you have some government officials being infected with the disease.
Basically, Liberia is a small country. Everybody know everybody, all right? We are so close when it comes to do with with our relatives. It's forbidden for you to to send your relative away when they're visiting you. Let me look at from your statistics. Let me look at the breakdown there. If you look at the breakdown, you realize that the cases is higher in Lofa County, where the disease was first spotted, and that of Monrovia County, which is Monrovia, that hosts, let's say, half of the population, because everything that's happening in Monrovia. All right, these are places that have a huge population. Lofa County is the second largest county in the Republic. It is the gateway to the economy as well. You find goods coming from Guinea, where the pandemic was first discovered. You find goods coming from Sierra Leone, as far as Senegal, that's passed through these countries, and Ivory Coast. So there's no way that we can battle this disease with all the help of the international community. But what really puzzles me is like, if the international community can attack this disease as they came in during the war, when a lot of Liberians were dying, I don't think we're going to go this far, where we found, let's say, Nigerian troop coming in to help stabilize the country. And if we can find...
But did the Ministry of Finance in your country send a petition to the World Health Organization or to the international community that, look, we've spotted these kind of diseases in our communities. We are not sure of what disease it was, because it took some time for even the first case of Ebola to be identified. And I'm sure at a point in time, people had died already in that cases. Who are some of the government officials that lost their lives as a result of this Ebola cases?
We have Sawyer that lost his life. He have to fly over.
Sawyer was who, the minister of?
No, he was an analyst. That also came from basically he have a connection with the Ministry of Finance that was going on a conference in Nigeria that through him the pandemic, according to international media, that the people in Nigeria got affected with the virus. As we speak, that it's unreliable, from an unreliable source, that the city mayor of Kolahun district in Lofa County has already, came down with sign and symptoms of the virus. There are other people, that will die not because they have the virus, but because there are a lot of, illnesses in Liberia that have similar, symptoms. Like malaria, that's so common. You come down with cold, you come down with fever, sore throat. These are running stomach, from chlorides. These are things that usually happens in our country far before Ebola. But now, because of the situation in the country, a lot of people are coming down with other diseases, are dying from other diseases, all because everybody think they got Ebola. All right. If a person is being affected with the virus,
wrong suspected cases.
That's the point. That's what I said. We are trying to put the process together because people are afraid to go to the hospital, all because they don't want to be confirmed with the virus. Because if you're being confirmed with the virus, you're going to be ostracized. You're going to be cut off from the community. Your relatives won't come closer to you. You're going to be quarantined. So that word and that situation is new to the population. The government, from my point of view, don't have the capacity to deal with this virus. It's obvious. That's why it shouldn't be taken lightly, because if not, it's going to affect the entire region.
You are in Monrovia.
Yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah.
You married?
Yes, I'm married with kids.
You have kids?
Yes.
How many kids?
I have 2 kids.
And they are all in Monrovia?
They are all in Monrovia, and that's the terrible part of it. The only blessing thing about it is that the confirmed cases among children at this moment is so low. All right, there are suspected cases, but the death toll is being so low than that of the death toll in others.
So what contingency plan have you put in place for your own family?
Quarantine my entire house. If I had to use the word, lock everybody down. There is no way the kids going to school. I can't do that. Yeah. Because they are going to school, they're going to be mingled with other kids from diverse backgrounds.
The president shut down all schools already.
All schools have been, from the university down to primary schools to nursery schools, have been shut down. When a case is being discovered in the hospital, the entire hospital is going to be shut down because people come in. That's why the death toll among health practitioners are very, very high, because they don't have that capacity to deal with the virus. It's like common things like gloves to use in hospital are not common. Wow. The protective gears. It was just of late that China, the People's Republic of China, have to donate, these materials to health practitioners. But you never know that this guy is down with the Ebola virus until he being tested. Until he come down with the virus. You can never know that I'm working with the virus until like 10 days before you will realize that.
So your children and all the other children in Liberia are no more going to school?
Are no more going to school.
Government's appointees are not all working. I understand it's just a skeletal.
It's just a skeleton staff that that I work to various ministry, because you can't risk the population, because people gonna interact. People gonna, like, some of the policy put in place. At first, we used to be like 4 in the taxi, excluding the driver. That means 1 in the front seat, 4 in the back. Now it's 3 in the front seat, 1 in the front.
But definitely people are going to touch each other anyway.
They're definitely going to touch each other, but it just takes the mercy of God to keep us going right now in Liberia. And
yourself, you work?
I do work.
So
I run a business that I interact with people every day. Before, if you were to, let's say, enter like 4 business places in Monrovia, you're going to wash your hands 4 times to every entry before entering that facility. From the ministry, from the office of the president down to a common, petty trader.
So how do you eat? I mean, from the look of things, quarantined your family, your children are indoors, your wife is indoors, you yourself, you work, but you hardly go out to any other place at all.
Yeah.
How life must be very, very very strange.
It is strange. It is strange. It's not only strange, it's difficult. Just imagine, it is a country where a lot of people live on $1 a day. These people don't have fixed job because the government is the highest employer, all right? People have to go out to fend for their family. So if you can see me, you know, if I'm the source of your daily income and you don't have access to me like you used to before, definitely your family going to be lack of certain commodity. Now we have the curfew in the country where at 9 o'clock, the entire nation is shut down till 6 o'clock the next morning. Liberia have some challenges when it comes to do with basic transportation, where you find like 100 of people on the street waiting for taxi, and at 6 o'clock, the taxi driver have to go home. So just imagine these challenges, all right?
Lewiz, even before we come to that, the World Health Organization has declared a public health emergency of international concern. I want us to talk about it. I also want us to look at how the president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, is handling this particular Ebola case, and that's going to be after this break. Welcome back. Mr. Lewiz McCarthy, a Liberian national in the capital, Monrovia, is my guest. We talked about the World Health Organization declaring a public health emergency of international concern. Okay. We've also had the president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, also calling on the international community to come to her country's aid. Being on the ground and listening to the global concern, you also heard about the UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, saying that, look, Ebola can be prevented. And so the stigma that is going on, I mean, from all over the world, the cancellation of flights and all that needs to stop. Let's talk about the president's assessment. How would you respond to your, or should I say, how would you grade your president's response to this Ebola virus?
I think in my own view, her approach was rapid. I think it was at the best, a very great point where she...
Rapid because she couldn't attend the Africa-America summit together with the Sierra Leonean president, or how do you rapid? Was she prompt on that?
I think getting involved, you know, all by herself, you know, cutting down a lot of other, troubles to be able to fight this pandemic, encourage other leaders, other political leaders to join her. This for the first time in my lifetime that I've seen a nation coming together as one force to fight a pandemic, where you found political leaders from other political parties, coming together, joining in hand with the president, people, permanent individuals taking all their time to sit at call centers to receive, emergency calls from the various communities to identify cases that are existing. That alone shows some concern. That was so amazing. So if we can come together as one force, with the limited resources to be able to battle this pandemic, I think it's the best moment and the best time that the UN or other international organization that can join us in this fight. Remember that if we can be successful in Liberia, we can also be successful in Sierra Leone, we can also be successful in Guinea. There were a lot of criticism from other stakeholders in Liberia why we never closed our borders when this pandemic first was spotted in Guinea. The president had been blamed by other stakeholders, for making this happen. But in my view, there was no way you could stop this pandemic anyway. It could have been more dangerous if a person in Guinea can just walk through his village and get into another village in Liberia, because that's how common we are.
How tight is the Liberia-Guinea border?
Liberia-Sierra Leone-Guinea border is so complicated. All right, you don't need a visa that often to cross over. You find the Mandingos in Guinea. You find the Mandingos in Sierra Leone. You also find the Mandingos in Liberia. You find the Mendes in Guinea. In Liberia. You also find the Mendes in Sierra Leone. You find the Kisi it's a trap. You find that in Guinea. You also find that in Sierra Leone. You also find that in Liberia. So you find the manas or the gills in Ivory Coast. You also find that in Liberia. So you found, I have relatives that live in Guinea. You can separate me from my relatives. If somebody in Conakry saying that, oh, I'm going to Liberia, they're not going to Liberia to rent a hotel. They're coming to our relatives. So that how complicated you found these 3 to 4 countries as coexisting. So closing the border is like opening a village to an illegal person. So there was no way we could close our borders. I think opening the borders show gave out the open space to see how dangerous this virus was, to see to have a clearer picture to the virus itself.
How do you feel yourself as a businessman? Because I know you're a traveler, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's no flight in your country. There's no flight getting out of your country. How are you going to manage that
That's
business?
terrible. That's terrible. If you go to the airport, that alone give a concern. You found like the Delta flight will be filled to capacity. As a matter of fact, the whole of August, there was no flight. Not a flight wasn't existing, but you couldn't buy the ticket because it was totally booked. September is the same. As we speak, British Airways canceled their flight. I think that was uncalled for, because canceling your flight, brought that panic. It brought the pressure onto the government. People started saying at first that because of insecurity, these flights are being canceled. Because of the pandemic, these flights are being canceled. Air Morocco is down.
Gambia Bird
is
Kenya
out.
Airways.
Kenya Airways, that refuse, that have this public outcry that they wasn't going to shut down. We saw the pressure from South Korea.
How would you respond to critics as a national of Liberia that your president this time round has not been able to convince the international community to support the country the more because of the cancellation of these flights? Gone were the days where the international community was in favor of Liberia, especially during the Civil War. She used her influence quite a lot. But in this particular case, it sounds quite different.
I think when you at a certain front, you being considered either less important or more important. I'm not saying that my president is being considered that way, but I think with her concern and the energy that she putting in here, I don't think she should have been in no way, because she's not only the president of Liberia, she's the first female president. She have made history. She's a Nobel Peace Prize award winner. So it should have attracted a lot of concern to the country. Instead, I think people at this moment, the world is being unfair, in my opinion, because we have taken the necessary measures with the limited resources to battle this pandemic and to prevent it as much as possible. Quarantine community with suspected cases have been elected to the very national point. There is no radio station that goes with all making emphasis on this virus. As a matter of fact, radio stations are giving free airtime to awareness of this virus into the nation. Individuals are taking on the responsibility. Local business professionals have been going to another level. Musicians from all walks of life, permanent presence have been making donations to the various places. So with the limited resources, we are battling it. If we can get the push from the international community, Ebola will be the history.
But the country itself is not helping itself, right? Because you have a chunk of your ministers, government officials, flying out of the country. When the president gave them the deadline to come at a particular time, majority of them have not been able to return to Liberia. Obviously, there is lack of dedication, there is lack of patriotism on the side of Liberians themselves, and this is what is causing all this, right?
At a point, if the international, let's say the International Aviation Authority creating such a panic, what do you expect? You expect panic all over the places. People are fighting for themselves.
I expect people who swore by the oath, by the Bible, to defend their country and to be there at all times, to be there. No matter what the international community does, no matter what an airline does, if as long as you've sworn to defend your country and to be there at all times as the Minister of State, I don't think anything should prevent you from staying in your country.
Let me just address this very carefully. From my point of view, if you have a nation that's in panic, Ebola is like war. We are not seeing the enemy. We are not used to the enemy. We are not aware or educated. We don't know much of the enemy. So it brings this national panic. People will want to protect themselves and their families instead of the masses, because you don't know who is who. Okay? So if you have an international aviation network creating such a panic, Ivory Coast is shutting their port to businesses, to goods and services that were first docked in Ivory Coast before Liberia, you will create a national concern. All right? I love the step the president took, because if you, like you said, if you took an oath to defend a nation, to be loyal to a nation, and you have to run away or take leaves and refuse to come back, you must resign your post or you'll be fired. And she will leave. She gave them an ultimatum. She will leave them of their post. That is the best step a leader can
take. Are you personally disappointed in your ministers?
I am absolutely disappointed in a lot of our
ministers.
As
a citizen of Liberia?
That left the country, that should have stand by their people. Let's look at it from the standpoint. A lot of ministers don't really interact physically with the ordinary people anyway. The ordinary people are the one coming down with these virus. You saw the president going into West Point, talking to people, having meetings upon meeting, getting involved himself. That she is the chief, the general on the front line. Yeah. All of you are just lieutenants. If the general can be on the front line to battle the disease, anybody can be there. So you leaving is just disservice to your country. So she got my 100% support of the stance that she took. We're leaving off your post. If you can't come back, you better as well stay with your family. You don't need to be in the country anyway. So that's the best approach she ever taken.
Mr. Lewiz McCarthy, for how long can Liberia endure this?
That is the $1 million question that the international community need to answer. For how long? Because this is absolutely getting out of hand. If we don't get all the necessary support that we need, if international health professionals, doctors without borders, if we can't address this issue as not only as a nation, but Africa, as the world as a whole, pretty soon it will be spotted into Europe. We also have a Europe case. We also have an American case.
DRC is
is coming out. So you see it sparking all over the place, just as it's being spotted in Liberia. There are some counties like Grand Bassa County have 2 cases. You never know how many persons that these individuals interacted with. People are running away from hospital based on, like, if you are being quarantined, the government don't have the capacity to feed you 24/7. If your entire family have been quarantined for 21 days, your basic needs have been cut off. Things that you used to are not being provided. Your cycle, you are being, is in pretty much mess up. There will be a lot of people not going to the hospital, staying indoors, dying, people walking on the street and falling dead, all because of the fear they have for this virus. The education need to be more.
But you're personally staying safe?
Personally, have to stay safe. Have to cut myself out from a lot of things that I usually do. I don't go to public places that often. I stay by myself, not because I want to be, but I have to protect my family first in order to stay alive.
If you have the opportunity to address your concern to the rest of the world, to have a plea to the international community to come to your country's aid, adding up to what your president has been calling, and indeed the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, what would your words be?
My word will be to the international community, give this a thought. Don't take it lightly. We don't want to be, right now, the cases in Liberia is above 1,000. We don't want this pandemic to reach to where there are 500,000 persons, because this is a country that have a population of a little over, let's say 1.5 million, all right? We don't want to have the case where we have like 500,000 persons being affected with the virus before the international community come to our aid. At that time, it will be pretty much too late. We won't then give the government the necessary support. If we have a quarantine in a community, the UN should come in with food, like what we used to experience during the war. If people can get food in their home, they won't have to go to the next community to affect or to infect other people. They will keep focused. They will battle this virus all by themselves. But if people have no option, they will break these containment centers. They will go out because they have to eat. I won't starve because I'm ill. I will have to fend for myself. I will not have to watch my child die, from disease or from hunger instead of the disease. I better get food, even though I'm being affected with the virus, but I better go out and do anything necessary to feed my family, to stay alive for that moment till the virus can take me down, then, being just locked up and watch myself die from hunger instead of the virus.
You still continue to live in Liberia?
I will continue to live.
You will be in Monrovia, the center of the epidemic.
I can't leave right now because there are lives that I have to save all by myself by being there than being out.
Lewiz McCarthy, thanks for your time.
You're most welcome, Jefferson.